In this episode, I speak to the power duo behind GAÁL. Brianna and Matt have, in my opinion, Australia's most transparent label. Listen in to find out why transparency is so important to them, as well as some advice for future brand owners. Enjoy the pod. So tell us a bit about yourselves and what prompted you guys to launch GAÁL.
I'll start. My background actually wasn't in design or anything like that. I actually came from technology consulting. So I guess the way I approached GAL was really from a consumer perspective. I was working really close to a big shopping center, and I became quite aware. I guess seeing a lot of sales cycles and things like that. I became quite aware of the fashion industry, and I think really fascinated with how it worked. But then I guess as I looked into it more, a lot of the ethical issues around fashion, and I guess I just became really, really interested in it. And then how it sort of would how I could then find clothes that would be fashionable, like within my taste, but also ethical and sustainable.
Okay, awesome. And in the past, you were a bit of a, I don't want to say fast fashion addict, but did you dabble in brands that maybe didn't align with your values as much as they do now?
I feel like I started not that way, and then working really close to the shopping center, I just got really sucked into sales for a while.
Okay.
And I realized I ended up with so many clothes in my closet that I couldn't fit anymore in. And I think that's when I realized that I needed to really look at what I was buying and where it was coming from.
Okay, fascinating. In yourself, Matthew, can you please share your story?
Well, look, I think just like Brianna, even less so, to be honest. I mean, I've never found myself to be much of a fashion kind of person. I mean, I was very much into the fast fashion when I was younger. I think it's more about the awareness of it. I was just never aware of the impact that the fashion industry had on our environment. And once you open your eyes to that kind of stuff, you kind of can't ignore it. So when obviously Brianna started down that path, and she obviously made me aware of it all, it was kind of a bit addictive. And I at first I didn't think I'd get so into it. I was there to support Brianna, but the more we got into it, the more I just became a partner to it, and now we see ourselves both running the business.
Oh, that's awesome. You almost felt compelled to make those positive changes in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's it. And sort of bringing it back to GAL a bit more now, what sort of prompted you guys to go down that specific niche?
I think it was a number of things. I didn't know for a while, I guess, with all the knowledge that I was kind of acquiring. I went from shopping on my lunch break at this big shopping center to walking around with earphones, listening to books and podcasts about ethical and sustainable fashion.
Okay.
So I really didn't know what my place was going to be. I knew I wanted to do something. I think I did start. I think it really came from, again, like a consumer point of view, really not finding really not finding clothes in the styles that I was really looking for, that had that went beyond basics, had a lot of color, but were also ethically manufactured and sustainably made. So really kind of trying to bring all of those elements together. I think it was just more of a consumer need than than anything else.
Yeah. Awesome. And I think a lot of the best businesses in the world tend to come from scratching your own niche, and it sounds like you guys have done that in your own creative way, and I'm sure it'll be just as successful. Now, just going to go a bit more narrow into GAL. Now, one of the things I really like about it is the depth of your transparency, and I really do think it's commendable. Can you please share with us the details that you share in the product descriptions and why that's important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we first started talking about GAL, we were almost hesitant to be really, really upfront about how sustainable we were. I think we wanted to lead with the clothes, but I think the more that we tried to build our, tried to design and find, source materials and things like that were sustainably made, we realized how difficult it actually is, and that you have to ask a lot of questions of people to find out whether things are, I guess, the most sustainable they can possibly be, or the most ethically made they can possibly be. And what we did find is, when people were doing, I guess, the right thing, for lack of a better word, they were really shouting it from the rooftops, because because the norm and the status quo is really not really looking into this stuff. So I think for us, having knowing that it is really difficult to firstly find that information for brands. That's why we wanted to put it on our website. We wanted to not just tell our customers, trust us, we're sustainable, trust us, we're ethical, but really show them as well.
Yeah. Awesome. And I don't know if Matthew, you want to touch on it any further, but like I really love reading your product descriptions and just sort of the exact details you guys go into. And I don't know if you want to discuss more about that, Brianna, or if Matthew, if you want to go into that a bit more, just the specifics of the transparency that you guys show in your product descriptions.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Brianna said, we had a lot of conversations early on about how we want to approach the transparency side. And there's a lot of other great brands out there who do it at various levels. And the way we saw it is, if we were going to be, you know, promoting transparency, promoting sustainability, then if we don't set that example and show that we really have nothing to hide, even if it is detrimental to our business. I mean, we have had people kind of say, oh, but you know, anyone can copy your clothes now, or something. But we don't see that as our value proposition. You know, just the materials we use. We like to think there's more than that. So the way we saw it is, we need to lead by example, and we don't have anything to hide, and we want it to be very clear.
Yeah, and I think it keeps us accountable as well. You know, every time designing something new, I'll always come up against new design challenges, and I'll have to find, you know, when I was designing a blazer, I had to find biodegradable shoulder pads, and I had never found, I found out that most of them have some kind of polyester component to them usually. And, you know, I was like, oh, maybe they can just take out the shoulder pads or something like that. And I'm like, no, I'm going to be putting this on the website. I want to be proud of where I source things from. And I think it just keeps me really accountable, that I know at the end of the day, everyone's going to be able to see what's there. And I want to be really proud of that, what goes into every single GAÁL item. And
it wasn't an easy process. There were a lot of frustrating times when we'd spend weeks on the phone or by email with suppliers, and we'd get led down a rabbit hole and end up basically stonewalled at a point where we couldn't find out specifically where the original fibers came from. And, you know, on the surface, on the original, you know, supplier website, it all looks great, and they talk about how transparent and sustainable they are. But if you try and follow that down the hole, it leads you into places you can't really find out the information you want.
Okay, that's awesome. It's so you were sort of just as transparent to your suppliers as you are now to your customers.
Yeah, and we make it very clear when we do work with suppliers and we, you know, are bulk ordering product from them, that we will be transparent with any information they provide to us. And that's why we ask these questions. We always lead, before we even go down the process of getting a quote or anything, we always lead with, you know, we need to know X, Y, and Z. We want to know everything about this fiber and this fabric, and we need to know exactly where and who makes it.
Yeah. And sometimes they are a bit taken aback by how many questions we ask. I think sometimes you've got to go to them 3 times before you get the real answer, that you'll be like, is this, you know, ethical and sustainable? And then they'll say yes, and then you'll ask a few follow-up questions that are a bit more specific, and then eventually you'll kind of realize, oh, actually, I think we need to find something else.
That's fantastic. And I'd just like to clarify for those listening that the type of details they have in their product descriptions, they also got the design, which is by them. They talk about the patterns, the gradings, the cutting and making, even the material. They talk about the threads come from, you know, the whole or Forbetex in Netherlands. The main label comes from Britannia Packaging in the UK. The care and size labels come from Gang Apparel Australia. So I just think that's amazing. Look, I don't think every brand is ever going to be doing this. I think, unfortunately, you guys will be in the minority, but I think it's really a great standard you guys are setting, and hopefully more brands can maybe not be 100% sustainable, but start maybe showing 10% and 15 and 25, and maybe get them closer to 40 to 50%. Because, like you guys are saying, you guys got nothing to hide, so you're happy to share everything. And I like to think it's not being that detrimental to the business, because you guys obviously got a lot more special qualities. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify the exact specifics you guys go into.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to be clear, our suppliers and our materials are not perfect. You know, there's totally lots of room for improvement. There's decisions we have to, sometimes have to make where it's the best that we can get, or that is accessible to us. We do our absolute best. But regardless of whether it's, we're really, really, really proud of the material, or we wish it could be better, we'll still put it there.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think we kind of touched on my next question, which is talking about like sort of why transparency is important to you guys as individuals and also as the brand GAÁL. Because as we said, a lot of other brands are ethically made, but a lot of them don't tend to share their supply chain to the extent that you guys do. So I know we've kind of touched on it already, but are there any sort of new points you guys like to talk about as to why, this, I don't want to say radical transparency, but maybe radical in the best possible way, how you guys are embracing it in this, full extent? Why is it so important to you guys in the GAÁL label?
Well, look, I mean, Brianna touched on her past experience being a technology consultant, and I have a very similar background as well, coming from the business side. And we've worked in a lot of large organizations, and, it might sound a little bit pessimistic, but, marketing and on the surface for a lot of companies, it's really easy to talk about things like sustainability or ethical practices and whatnot. But in the actual practice of those things, it is a little bit more complicated or not quite what you think it is. So it was really important to us that if we did start a company, that we weren't, hypocrites, that if we're going to talk about this in our personal life and say how things can be better and that people can be better, then we kind of need to do that ourselves. It became frustrating at some points because it definitely adds time and complexity to things that we do. And it is tempting to take those shortcuts, as a lot of companies end up doing. But if we're going to go back on the reason we started the company at all, then it kind of is all for nothing.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Did you find that a few, I don't, you don't have to disclose the company, or maybe you've seen other companies have done this, that they market sustainability or ethical, being ethically made as more of a marketing token, like a tokenism for marketing, or is that what sort of you're touching upon there?
Well, I mean, look, I'm sure you're familiar with greenwashing, George.
Yeah.
The terms definitely come more into the public sphere these days. And I think we do see a lot of big companies using that.
Yeah.
I guess that happens when anything becomes a trend. People sort of take it up, and sustainability has, it's obviously really, really important. But I guess as it's become really prominent, it's also become a bit of a trend. Like everything, big corporates do tend to grab onto it, and that can be good for raising the profile of sustainability. But unfortunately, sometimes it does confuse customers, and whether that's intentional or not, I won't, I guess, provide an opinion on that. But it can confuse customers, and they see these buzzwords and they think that they're in safe hands, even if they are shopping at a big fast fashion label. It is challenging. I think for us, we just try to really focus on what we can do, what our role can be, and making sure that we're really abiding by those values that we've set for ourselves, and hopefully through that trying to educate our customers as well, knowing that there is lots and lots of information out there and misinformation, and just trying to be I guess specific about things, rather than I think a lot of people do and companies do talk about these things, as Matt was sort of saying, in really big picture terms, whereas I guess we're kind of taking that more bottom up, trying to detailed approach of every single material of what we do, and really trying not to be vague about it, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Brianna. I think there's a lot of great points there, and we won't dive into the greenwashing rabbit hole because I think the three of us probably be here for about 2 hours. So
we could do a whole podcast on it.
Yeah, probably a whole series on it, but we'll have to save that for next time. My next question comes a bit more from a business point of view. You guys both being in that space and quite knowledgeable in it, but being a young label, what are some of the challenges you guys have faced, and how did you overcome them? And I guess the reason why I want to ask this question is for people who are listening who have thought about starting their own label, have just started their own label, sort of how can they learn from some of your mistakes too? So yeah, please share some of the details you're happy to share.
Well, look, first of all, I think diving into an industry like fashion, coming from a business background, is a very different type of industry. There are a lot of, I guess, complexities around how the more creative side of the fashion industry work, and things like, simple things like deadlines and kind of manufacturing processes, which at the surface are very kind of simple and you think are going to be easy to navigate, become a big issue, I guess. I mean, when you have a whole collection planned, you're looking at a 3 to 4 month timeline, and the smallest little delay in a certain fabric or a certain piece of material can cause major delays down the line. And obviously we know fashion is very seasonal, and that can cause issues. And building in leeway for changes like that in your timeline is something we learned very fast. I think we were a bit ambitious at the start. I think we were a bit overconfident in not our abilities, but more our awareness of how difficult it could be to stick to deadlines.
Yeah.
So I think building that into your timelines at the start was something we learned very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's super important because, as you guys would know, a lot of the time, any sort of goals or timelines tend to go out the window and get delayed, and problem here, problem there. So I guess that always happens. And Brianna, do you have any sort of challenges and tips to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I think so. For our first collection, I probably went a little bit naive about when people would tell me how long things would take.
Yeah.
And I took everything at face value and sort of planned a little bit of buffer in there. But I think I learned a lot the first time round. I know I learned a lot. And when it came to planning our second collection, I just added, I think, 2 or 3 weeks onto everything. And I had my best, worst, medium case scenario for everything. I had we knew that we had a market at the end of in early December, and that was our real deadline for getting the collection. And I guess it's just building in sometimes you have to do things like tell people that you need something slightly earlier than you do, because otherwise you just don't get prioritized, because everyone wants everything yesterday. So you just have to obviously you have to balance that, but I guess it's just planning is just so important. Designing, the design part is such a small part of it. It's everything that comes after that to get to actually realize it as a clothing line, that just takes such meticulous planning and problem solving and driving all over Melbourne for me, which is always fun.
I guess the trials and tribulations of a business owner, and there's probably going to be many more of those for years to come.
A lot less driving this year, actually.
Okay, definitely. Definitely. Well, I think we're recording in late July, and it's not the greatest in Melbourne at the moment still. So, hopefully that changes for the better. And I might throw you guys a bit on the spot here, but are there any sort of, I guess, funny mistakes that you guys have made, or maybe you guys showed a bit of naivety and made a mistake somewhere? Any of those sort of examples, just to sort of humanize the concept of creating your own business, in that, none of us are these super, you guys are very intelligent, but not that you're not perfect, that you make mistakes. So I know I'm putting you guys on the spot here, but are there any sort of maybe trivial mistakes?
We've made plenty of mistakes.
Yeah.
We've made plenty of mistakes. I'm trying to work out which ones I can see now as funny.
Well, so one of the things I can think of is dealing with exchange rates and overseas transfers. I think a few things that we kind of missed the point of it being in a different currency. We actually spent a bit more money on some things and I think very early on as well, not knowing what things really should cost or how much we should expect to spend. There were definitely some times we overspent on some key items. So our original budget was fair to say it was pushed out pretty heavily.
That was definitely a thing. I think the other thing that we did were again, coming back to the fact that we have a really high level of scrutiny when it comes to what materials we use. We bought we'd spent so long trying to find labels for our that were going to fit within our sustainability criteria for our collection. We finally found these ones that we thought were perfect, and they were organic cotton. They were perfect. We put the order in. We thought we were done. We were so excited, and then they came back and we figured out, the stitching on the label has polyester thread, and it was on the way. We'd spent, and they weren't cheap. They weren't cheap, and we were like, oh no, we had to reverse course, and because we've come so far in trying to find something that's going to live up to our standards, and that was a bit of a headache. It ended up being okay, but it was one of those scratching.
And I think it was one of the final pieces of the clothing, just finalizing the labels. We were so close, and it's small things like that.
It's got another curveball
followed by some some calls.
Without a doubt. But look, thanks for being so honest and pardon the pun, transparent about your mistakes too, as much as you are with your brands. And then to wrap up, are there any exciting plans for the future with GAÁL?
So look, I mean, of all the times to ask that, this is probably the best time, because I think not only during COVID, obviously is throwing a few curveballs everyone's way in the small business world. But
Yeah.
even before that, I think now that we've been running for a year, or just over a year now, since our launch, we're starting to not so much reevaluate, but evaluate the business and based on our performance, do we continue on the current trajectory? Do we stick to the original plans? Do we pivot the business somewhat? Do we look for outside investors? Are we happy to keep self-funding? These are all questions we're asking ourselves at the moment.
Yep.
I don't think we have the answers yet. I think there's a lot of good questions and a lot of things we're thinking of.
Yeah, I think with everything slowing down, it gives us a lot of breathing room to kind of have a think about what we really want to do. And so nothing concrete at the moment as to things that are coming up. It's really hard to plan for any big things at the moment, just with all the uncertainty. But we're definitely thinking and planning a lot in these times where we are just at home and have that's all we have to do.
Yeah.
I think one thing that doesn't change for us is that we want GAÁL to grow. And we want it to be, a big brand. We want to be not only in Australia, we want to be overseas. We want to be a leader in the sustainable fashion world. So I guess it's just the pathway to getting there is what we need to figure out.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I'm sure you guys will get there in the long run. But what are you guys planning to be internationally? Is that like a sort of a 2-year plan, 3-year plan, 1 year, 5 years? What's the approximate timeline on that? I won't hold you to it.
Well, I mean, look, in terms of international, we'd love in the 2 to 5 year mark.
Yeah.
We've always thought of GAÁL as a big picture brand. We started obviously small, like any business, and where we did markets across Australia. We traveled interstate. But, the end goal is obviously international. I think, if you look at overseas markets like America, Europe, and Asia, we pale in comparison. And in terms of the fashion industry, obviously they're world leaders over there. Australia's like the little brother, I guess. So that's our ultimate goal. Look, 2 to 5 years. Yeah. I really want to aim for that. I'd love for 2 years, and we'll do everything in our power to get that done. It's our passion at the end of the day, and it's where we want to be.
Yeah, awesome. I'm sure you guys will get there. We'll get there one day. Hopefully, it is in 2 years' time. But so Brianna and Mathew, a big thank you for your time today, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having us.
No worries, guys.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you so much for listening. It really does mean the world. If you like what you heard, please leave a nice review. And if you have any feedback or want to recommend a guest, and yes, that can include you love yourself, please email me at jordan@stridestore.com.au.